Dick Powell is a product designer responsible for breakthrough design concepts such as Casio's Baby G, Axis Spine's breakthrough spinal technology, and Tefal's cordless kettle, to name a few. Heston Blumenthal called upon Seymourpowell to create theatre within their dining experience. Who's the man that also moonlights as the former chairman of D&AD, inspiring government as well as business leaders to recognise the value of embedding design and creativity into the DNA of British industry. Oh, and he also contributes to television formats for Channel 4. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to meet you. You follow on. You've got some heavy competition. We just met Morton Warren from Native.
Terrific. I love Morton.
What a guy.
Yeah.
But I'm sensing that you are going to be along the same lines, personality-wise.
Yeah, we're quite alike in some.
Eccentric.
Not really. I don't think I'm as eccentric as Morton.
Interesting. That was just provoking you.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. I've noticed that you've come to the podcast studio on a rainy day with no socks on today.
Yes.
So I'm making up my own story that's eccentric.
I'm an optimist, thinking it's going to get sunny.
I can imagine that about you. You're an optimist who designs.
You can't ride a motorcycle without being an optimist. You know, you just have to always got to believe it's not going to rain.
Especially in central London. Yeah. So let's start the show. How we normally start the show is with an icebreaker, right? So if you can share a piece of information about yourself that people wouldn't typically associate, or maybe you've bought a product, or you can show me something about yourself. So, for example, Oliver Heath, the biophilia designer, he shared that he used to be a fire eater.
Gosh.
Amazing.
Incredible. You should have given me a bit more warning about this question.
Well, I know that you can think on the spot.
Oh my God.
You are a man of many talents.
The question was, again, something unusual about myself.
Yes.
That people are unlikely to know.
Yes.
I mean, I think that I'm not in the kind of designer mold, you know, the kind of grand diva and, you know, making big statements. So, you know, I have a very fabulous family life, a fabulous family, you know, very wide family now. And, you know, we don't live in a sort of monument to modernism. You know, it's a very straightforward, happy life. But
see, that doesn't surprise me. I need to stop you there. That does not surprise me, because one of the things that you first pulled me up on, and people wouldn't have heard this, is when I read your bio to you and I said, Dick has designed. And you said, no. I have not designed that, Melissa. My company, Seymourpowell, has designed this.
That's right.
So it doesn't surprise me that you have a very connected family.
Seymourpowell is very much a consultancy model, as originally kind of created by people like Ken Grange and BIB, in that we work for brands. We've always focused on not being a brand ourselves. So it's not very often designed by Dick Powell or Richard Seymour or whoever it is in the company. It's always been about the whole business, because it takes a team of people to do these things. You know, it's not like one person sitting down with a crayon and sketching something. It's not like that. It takes a big group of people, and we all work together. And I think that's the culture of that business. You know?
It also takes a certain mindset to be able to share the successes with your team and not to take all the credit, Dick.
Yeah, we don't take the credit, but Richard and I were never slow at coming forward. You know,
what does that mean?
Remember, we put ourselves right out there in the world of design. You know, we made TV programs, we joined all of the design organizations, we worked on behalf of design, and that was very much part of our ethos, that we wanted to lift design in the public consciousness, which is why it took us on TV in the end. Yeah,
which I want to talk to you about in a minute. So one thing is, you are not shy and retiring.
No, not shy and retiring.
Behind those invisible glasses, there is somebody that is very confident and proactive.
Yes, that's true.
Who I know gets up, or used to get up at 5 a.m. You're part of the 5 a.m. club, like Morton.
Part of the 5 a.m. club. Nowadays it's 6, actually, but for 35 years...
Philistine.
5.
What did you do at 5 o'clock?
Well, get in the car. You know, you don't wake up for the first 10 miles, you know, and get to work. Actually, I used to ride a motorcycle for the first 25 years of commuting.
Why? Before we talk about motorcycles, so 5 a.m., why was that the sweet spot for you? I mean, that's a lot of day to be filling.
It's just to avoid the traffic. It's just that simple. and you get to work. And I'm better, and I function better in the mornings. I can do a lot of thinking in the mornings. It's amazing how even in the dullness of a vehicle, of a car, my brain is ticking over about the project I'm doing. And just this morning we're working on something, and I thought, goodness me, that's an avenue we haven't looked at. And it doesn't come through logical thinking through things.
I want to know all about that.
Well, that's a big discussion about creativity.
Good. I want to talk about
because creativity doesn't always just come from an analytical, objective analysis of all of the criteria that inform what you do.
What does it come from for you?
It comes from bandwidth of thinking. The most creative people are the people who think very broadly. They've got interests in everything from architecture to ballet, and they're not focused 100% on what they do. And those people find inspiration and ideas in very wide avenues. So bandwidth is super important to creativity. And the old saying that Archimedes had the idea in the bath. Actually, he had the idea in the bath because his brain was relaxed and not focused on the problem. And sometimes we get too focused on the problem, and you have to kind of let go a bit and let the ideas come.
How do you let go and let the ideas come?
Well, for me, the most important thing about creativity is drawing. I've always been a passionate drawer. I've even written books about it.
Yeah.
So drawing as a means of self-communication, sketch, draw something, see how it evolves. If you watch me on the telephone, I'm always drawing and sketching. And the fact that the phone call is about something else while your hand is doing something completely different can really make a huge difference. You disconnected that logical thinking, and you've introduced just an emotional, subjective, immediate response to what you're doing.
Oh, this is fascinating. What do you know then about disconnecting the logical brain to inspire the emotional?
It's just an awareness that the most creative people are the people who don't necessarily sit down and focus on a linear analysis that leads to a solution. That's important. Everybody has to do that. We do that. Of course we do. But sometimes you've got to kind of move away from it. I always used to say to students, read the brief, put it away in a drawer, don't look at it until you've done. Right? And then analyze what you've done against the brief and see if it fits, see how well it fits. Because if you rigorously follow the brief, normally a brief is a collection of client prejudice. It's not usually very helpful for you. It defines certain parameters, some of which you've got to push and pull against. You're not necessarily going down their route. In fact, we never go down their route. But this idea of putting the brief away and not looking at it is part of disconnecting yourself from that linear objective thought.
Now that's interesting. So we receive a brief, and you're encouraging your team to read the brief and then apply their methodology, their methods, their techniques to steer the client where? Who knows where the right place is, and how do you establish where the right place is?
So that's a separate question. We have a team called Foresight, and the Foresight team is a team that is looking into the future and working in the future. So they're looking at trends in particular. They're looking at social trends. They're looking at context, so the context for the brief. What are the competitors doing? What's the marketing context for it? What's the industrial context? What new technologies we can bring to bear to deliver it, and all those sorts of things. And they are setting out, if you like, the playing field on which we're going to operate. It doesn't stop us moving left or right or forwards or backwards, but it sets out the parameters. And more important, it brings a level of understanding to the client. So when we're presenting the creative work, they get it because it's within the context that they've understood as a consequence of what Foresight is doing.
For most of the client briefs that you receive, and we'll talk more about some of the quality of the clients. You're working with the A-list of the clients. Virgin Galactic. You created the Baby G, the Casio.
Yes, we did. Yes,
I love that.
God, I loved working for Casio. They were such fun days.
Incredible. I'm curious. What does a client believe they are looking to achieve? Because you talk about looking into the future. Is the client, when they give you a brief, are they looking to achieve incremental sales? Are they looking to achieve heighten brand awareness through creating new products? What typically does
nearly all the briefs arise because the client's business is making profits. It's that simple. You do sometimes get wider issues than that, but 90% of the time it's about sales and it's about margin and profit. So that is absolutely fundamental. In the case of Baby G is a fascinating one because by the time we started working on Baby G, we'd already worked with Casio for a little bit, maybe a year or two, and we knew them well. And I was am a good friend of their chief designer there, and he said to me one day, "How can we sell digital watches to women?" That was the trigger for that whole project, basically. And it was fascinating because the Foresight team started to look at fashion trends in particular for young women, and what they were doing with their free time, one thing and another. And we were able to put together this was at a time when grunge was, really the sort of teenagers were starting to get into grunge, all kinds of things. And we and Toshi, the guy in charge there, could see that making a miniaturized version of their G-Shock watch, but make it smaller, appropriate for a woman, for example. But then it was all about how it was positioned, how it was sold. They were really clever. They engaged the Spice Girls before they were famous. And there's a story there, which probably we're not going to cover today, but the clue's in the name. And then, then the way that they very cleverly marketed it was fantastic, and it went on to be a major brand for that company.
Interesting. So what comes first then? It's the client brief is always your starting point for the creative process, as opposed to the Foresight team who are creating the future trends.
Yeah, I mean, most of the projects on which the business depends come from a brief of some kind, but we do a lot of self-initiated projects of one kind or another. So, for example, we did a project 2 years ago about the future of beauty and what's happening in the beauty industry.
Who with?
That was us, a self-initiated project looking at how that might develop.
Where's it going?
Oh, God, how long have you got? No, we're not going to do that now.
Organic?
No, we've got lots of other things to talk about other than that. But we do these self-initiated.
You're very assertive. That's one thing.
Sorry.
No,
so
never apologise for owning it.
Okay.
I'm loving it.
Okay.
Keep going.
But I think we've got more interesting things to talk about. But self-initiated projects Richard and I did right at the beginning of the start of the business.
Is this resource available for internal, or we can access it as well?
The old stuff we did, yes.
Well, this research.
Yeah, the research on the future of beauty.
Yeah.
You're still on about that, even though I said we'd talk about that later.
I want to know about your research, your self-initiated research. Is this kind of available?
Yes, the Future of Beauty project is widely available. You can see that. But lots of the research that we do on behalf of our clients is not available, obviously. So we don't want to share that advantage with a competitor.
You have a very confident approach to talking about design. You are widely accessible on YouTube. You are kind of a spokesperson for many different brands and institutions. I'm still interested. Like, what inspired you to wake up one morning and think, I would like to work in the field of product design?
Well, when I was growing up, the acceptable face of art for my father was architecture.
Was he traditional?
Yeah. I come from a kind of traditional background.
Where are you from?
He wanted me to go to university from Surrey, originally. But I went to public school where art was something you paid extra for. It wasn't even on the curriculum. I had to do all the art A-levels myself. That involved, I also had to study the history of architecture. So.
Is that because art wasn't necessarily perceived as being a valuable subject?
Definitely not. It's a hobbyist thing at school in those days.
And you had the courage to say to your dad, despite that not being readily available to you, Dad, I want to study art.
No, I was going to study art, but career-wise, we were focused on architecture because architecture was the acceptable face of art for him. And for me, I'm interested in architecture, for God's sake. I love architecture. It's not like I don't like it, And it blended the two things that my love when I was growing up. One was creating things in Meccano. Meccano was the forerunner of Lego. And it's very interesting, I think, to look at Meccano. Meccano, the construction technique of Meccano reflects the manufacturing techniques of the time.
How so?
Press metal, nuts and bolts, how things go together. Whereas Lego reflects the manufacturing process of today, clip fits and plastic and everything else. But Meccano taught me about structure, taught me about mechanism, taught me about how things work, all that, the sort of the mechanical side of things, which I always loved. And I love taking motorcycles apart and that sort of thing. And putting art, which is my other great love, drawing and painting and so on, smash those two together, and you got architecture in those days, right? I'd never heard of design. And then in the school library, there was a copy of Design Magazine as published by the Design Council, which was in those days probably 10 years old, I guess, I don't know. And I looked at that and thought, this is me. This is me. I remember opening the pages and seeing there was an article about the design of JCB's earth movers. By the way, we worked for JCB, subsequently. And I thought, this is what I want to do. And the great thing about it was to get into art school to do product design, I only needed 5 O-levels, whereas I was on the down to do an extra term and apply to Cambridge to do architecture, and I already had like 11 O-levels and 1 A-level. So I thought, this is what I'm going to do. And I thought, I went to foundation course, best time of my life, and then 3 years in Manchester, which is formative and taught me a lot. But the thing that changed me the most was the Royal College of Art.
How did it change you?
Well, the Royal College of Art then, in my year there were 9 of us. So it's very small. The group was a small group.
Well, what is it today? How many?
It's in the 50s. I don't know what it is. I don't know.
I wonder why that was. There was less people on the course. Is that because?
No, because in those days it was before pre-Thatcher, and telling everyone that 50% of the, or even more of the people in the country needed to go to university. University was not what it is today. It was just fewer people doing it. I mean, there were still a lot of applicants, but they only took 9 or 10 people. And that meant, and in every department, whether you were textiles, furniture, jewelry, graphics or whatever, they were relatively small groups of people. And therefore you were thrown together with really exceptionally talented people. The cream of the British design education system ended up at the Royal College of Art, and you were working alongside. I mean, I felt, oh my God, I'm an imposter here. These people are way too good for me.
And I imagine they thought the same of you.
Well, they probably did. I don't know.
Who are your peers? Anyone you keep in touch with now?
Well, lots of people that in my year, like a lot of, because I was very close to the transport team, what's called automotive in those days, and those guys, who I knew really well, all went on to be leading lights in the car design industry. And in the world of product, almost everybody went on to do something important, make a difference in design. So it really was the most fantastic educational experience, and it taught me the importance of, from school I'd learned a lot academically, having done A-levels and things, about the importance of how you express yourself, how you talk, how you write, for example. Writing, I'm really important, passionate about how you write. And those things proved to be incredibly useful, when I got into the world of design, where a lot of people were not so articulate necessarily. They were great designers, but they weren't able to express what they were doing. And I found those two things, that ability really lifted me a lot. The Royal College really took me to a place where I thought, I can do this.
It developed an inner confidence in you that was...
Inner confidence, definitely. And with peers in different disciplines, I have friends who were sculptors, painters, fashion designers, it's a wonderful world.
And your specialism was?
Product design.
Product design, okay. And what particular sector within products did you decide was of interest to you?
Well, there wasn't a sector. It was like, in those days, that course was about mass-produced manufactured products. It hadn't become the sort of, darling, I think we should have a light. It wasn't sort of, that. It was much more focused on the design of everyday products. And companies like Ken Grange, BIB, Allied International, these were consultancies doing that on behalf of manufacturers, and that's what I wanted to be.
And fast forward, how many years ago were you there? You say it. 20 years.
No, 40,
yeah.
40-something years.
Fast forward 20 plus 20 years. Yeah. Would you still advocate there is a place to a place for students to study there, as opposed to different routes to entering the product design market?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, I mean, there are some outstanding students coming out of the Royal College of Art. That hasn't changed, I don't think.
So on a CV, that will set people apart.
Yes. But I mean, there are other great colleges. We take an awful lot of people from Loughborough, for example, from Northumbria, and from foreign universities too.
So when you are, when you're sitting in a sea of CVs, I imagine you've got...
I don't do that anymore.
An HR department. Yeah. What would differentiate somebody that you can see is going to satisfy the credentials of Seymourpowell, a product designer at Seymourpowell?
We are generally looking for people like us.
What does that mean?
It means they have the same skill set as our people. And the skill that we most miss is creativity and the ability to draw and express and have ideas. Now, that is a singular skill that is very hard to come by. And one of the reasons for that is that colleges and universities no longer put it on their agenda. It's no longer important, because why do I need that when I've got a computer?
Yeah. Why is it important to you?
Because we have always found that people who are good at expressing themselves with a pencil and can create things, they are very rare. Let me tell you, they are really rare. And when you find them, you really want to hold on to them, because they're fast, they're extremely good, they're absolutely on the trends, what's happening, they're inspired. Those people are very hard to find. But that's not to say we don't have all those other people, because we've got lots of people who are brilliant on CAD. I can't even drive 3D CAD systems, right? I came to that too late in life to learn that. I can do Photoshop and Illustrator and all those other things. But, we've got guys who are, and I think this is a really interesting question, whose CAD skills are close to emulating a pencil. They're that fast that they can do something more quickly than you could, but obviously do it better. And that's an interesting convergence. Where do the CAD, with VR and everything that's happening, when do those skills finally converge, where actually the tool in your hand is not a pencil, but a mouse or VR headset or whatever it is.
But for you see an added value in a product designer that can still sketch using a pencil.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of extra creativity.
I don't want to put off all the guys who might apply, and girls who don't have that sketching ability.
I was going to say
they're incredible. We've got.
For example, children nowadays. Yeah. My partner owns a law firm, and he hired a young kid that was going into Cambridge, and he hired the kids to help around the office, and the kid could not take a phone call because he didn't understand the skill of picking up the office phone. Hello, how can I help you? Who can I direct your phone call to? Because he was so used to using his mobile phone, which flashes up who's calling, so you don't have to ask, hello, who's calling?
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So he still had the skills, but he had to be taught.
Yeah, there's a lot.
The different skills.
I think when you get a graduate who joins us, we don't take on that many graduates, but when we do, it takes a year to 2 years to really begin to be productive.
How do you
1 to 2 years.
How do you define productive?
Well, what they do makes money. It's productive in the sense that you give them a brief, they come up with something, you present it to the client, and then you can invoice the client for the brilliant work that they've done.
Yeah.
But it's many years before they're actually probably doing that on their own. There's always a support team of people around them, around the youngsters when they're learning. They have to learn by osmosis. They sit next to people who are doing it. They can learn very quickly from doing that.
And what is your what's your infrastructure? How does the process work from initial brief through to the Foresight team?
Most often, there is a lot of dialogue that goes on with the client before we first of all got to win the project. That's the biggest challenge.
And that's yourself.
No, less me now. I no longer own the company, and I no longer run the company, right? I just work there, and I'm in the brilliant position and I only have to work 2 days a week, and I work creatively on things that I'm interested in, which is a fantastic place to be. But the work is usually won by other people, like our CEO, the senior people from the various teams. And then it typically comes in and it goes to the Foresight team will do a big upfront component usually, which is about often user research. As I explained earlier, it's about establishing context for what you're doing. It's about the trends that drive what you're doing. And that there probably you might even have 2 or 3 people working on that Foresight piece of work. And the creative team is not kind of waiting for that. We generally get going before we've got all that. And we would marry those things together as the first phase of project goes through. And then we will then present to the client both sets of work, and the model shop as well. We've got a model shop with people making mock-ups of things. That'll be part of it as well.
And what time frame is your start to finish process?
What do you want, a train or a kitchen appliance?
So it varies depending on sector?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It totally varies.
Yeah. So there's no...
Depends how complex it is. Some things are very complex and some things are quite simple.
But I'm imagining, some of the process can take years.
Big projects, trains, aeroplanes.
Virgin Galactic.
Ships. Virgin Galactic is a particular story, but that was a rapid thing to happen. That happened in about a year. Maybe it was a year and a half. I can't remember. But there's a story behind how that happened. We worked with Virgin Galactic.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
Yeah,
because I'm a bit nervous now because I'm not allowed to talk about beauty.
No, you can talk about beauty.
Thank
but
you.
I think there are more interesting things to talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we can talk about Virgin. Go on, spill.
We worked with Virgin about 11 or 12 years ago when they were in their infancy, really. And they, a guy called Bert Rutan from Advanced Composites had won the ANSI X Prize with Virgin backing. So Virgin was painted all over his spaceship. The ANSI X Prize was the first man into space commercially as opposed to with a government institution like NASA. And Richard then decided to turn this into a venture. By the way, I didn't tell you I grew up with Richard Branson.
There you go.
So I grew up from the age of 1 or 2 years old.
In Holland Park?
Richard. No, in Surrey.
Okay.
Yeah. And my brother formed Virgin with Richard back in the day.
Wow.
So anyway, Richard didn't employ me. I got called by someone at Virgin Galactic, and they said, because obviously Richard knew of me, and said, we want to create a mock-up because we're going to be launching this idea. We need to persuade astronauts to sign up. And we said, we can't build a mock-up for the money you're offering here.
I can't even imagine what's going on in the office. I know you've grown up, with this guy, with Richard Branson around you. So this is like your normal life. But to receive that sort of call in your office, is that normal?
Well, no, because it wasn't Richard. It was someone at Virgin Galactic.
Okay, but still, the brand.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, it's fantastic. You get that sort of call and you go...
Yeah. Okay.
And it's exciting. Is it
exciting?
And lots of things like that happen, that are very, very exciting. So we did that. We couldn't do for the money, the mock-up. So we did an animation. We said, what you need, you don't need a mock-up. What you need is an animation which shows the astronaut experience from beginning to end. And they said, that's great, we'll do that. But we're not, because of what's called ITAR regulations in America, they're not allowed to export technologies to do with space abroad. So we had to kind of guess what it was going to be like to do this. And if you compare our animation we made 12 years ago, whatever it was, with the real thing today, it's amazing how close we got.
Congratulations.
Really amazing. And then they went off to deliver it, and then we got a call, I can't remember exactly when, saying, we're in trouble here. We need your help because lots of things weren't working. These guys are pioneers. Going into space, there's not a handbook you can read about how to do it. The engineers everybody's new to this, and they were in trouble with the interior, the seat systems, the seatbelt systems, and all of that. And
I guess you haven't got a blueprint. You haven't got a roadmap. This is the road less travelled. You have not trodden on this path before, so you're learning as you're going.
Yeah, but we were inheriting. They had a designer who's part of the company, and we were brought in to oversee what he was doing. And it was quite clear that a lot of this, their CEO had spotted, it wasn't going to work, So we went in, and 3 of us were there. We flew out, and my guys literally went to the local hardware store and bought some modelling tools and created a mock-up over the next couple of days for some of the systems, like particularly seatbelt systems, because in space there's no gravity, so your auto rewind safety belts don't work. So they do what's called kelping. We called it kelping, where that they do this, right? And our team went up in they call it the vomit comet, where you fly parabolas, and then in that short period of time you get about 30 seconds of weightlessness, so you can see how difficult it is to get hold of your seatbelt. Because when you're in space, you need to be back in your seat quite quickly and buckled up for the descent. And, my guys are absolutely brilliant at this. They're literally, they're in there with knives and bits from hardware stores, and they're mocking up a seatbelt system. And by the end of the day, we could turn to their CEO and say, there you go, that works.
Here's a solution to your problem.
They'd never had that before.
What was the solution?
Well, it required elastic, basically. It's simple, but difficult thing to think of. Your seatbelts automatically pull back into a certain position, so that when you sit down, they're always there, and you can pull them out and buckle up. So that was one of about 20 or 30 problems that all needed addressing. So we were really just helping them get their existing concept into space, which we did.
So not only are you looking into the future...
By the way, so the super interesting thing, I'm sorry to interrupt you about all this, was that having done it, they wanted to launch it because they depend on astronauts signing up and all of that. It had to be launched in the middle of the pandemic. So we had to do everything in VR. So we actually built a VR environment and sent out 150 headsets to journalists around the world. So
I bet that brought you out in a nosebleed, because that doesn't involve drawing.
No, it doesn't. But I've got...
Do you like VR?
But we have,
are you into
yes,
VR?
Well, we've got brilliant people at it, and for them, it's like heaven, this sort of project. And we realized during the pandemic that there are so many things that the pandemic was making difficult, and like launching a new product, for example. How the hell do you do that when you haven't got exhibitions, you can't go into shops and what have you? And by the way, we've been working a lot in spine surgery. So,
I saw that.
So how do you do that in a pandemic? And VR allowed us, Virgin, to launch what they did to journalists and around the world using virtual reality.
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about VR then. So you mentioned about Virgin Galactic during and the spinal surgery, the brand that you work with. How do you crew up during a pandemic to satisfy the need to work in this VR space?
Well, we already had the guys. They were already they're technocrats. These are guys who are at the cutting edge of VR. And therefore we already had all the skills. Just suddenly the Pandora's box opened, and there was the possibilities beginning to emerge. We can actually start to make far better use of all of this. I mean, spinal surgery. We work for this brilliant little startup called Axis Spine. And the question I most often get asked, for example, when I sit down at a dinner to someone, people say, "What do you do for a living?" And the doctor says, "I'm a doctor." That person says, "You're a lawyer," and you say, "You're a product designer," and you tell them what you do, and they say, "How can you design a television one day and something for surgery the next?" And the answer is the processes by which they're all made are the same, and the skills you need to do it are broadly the same. And I didn't know anything about spinal surgery. But when you talk to surgeons and you watch surgeons doing what they've got to do and talking about the issues they have, you're standing there in an operation watching them, and they're saying, "Oh, this is really tricky," as they get the mallet out to hit it, And this is the issue we've got. We can't move the blood vessels. We can't do this. We can't do the other. And the solution for the patient is not as good as it should be because of X, Y, and Z. And then we sat down with them in a creative workshop together, two surgeons and the creative team and the Axis Spine founder, and we generated an innovative new spinal implant that sorted their problems, And because we knew how things are made and how they go together, and then we were able to mock it up, trial it, and do all these things, and it's a very exciting way of working.
One of the things that I hear you talking about is identifying problems and finding solutions.
That's true.
I feel that almost your name, product designer, almost needs to be changed to problem solver. Problem-solving designer.
Well, we call ourselves a design and innovation business because a lot of the work we get is innovation. And I say that because the brief for the client doesn't always know what they want. And they know they need innovation because innovation for them means increased sales, better margins, new markets, new possibilities, and what have you. And
staying relevant.
The consultants are staying relevant. And the consultants, the sort of, the financial consultants of the world, the McKinseys of this world, and say you need innovation, right? But what happens is they're like giant jellies. These big companies, that they spend a lot of money, they hire consultants, they have workshops, they set up teams internally. Like the giant jelly, they wobble about for a while, and after a time they just go back to how they were before. They don't really change. And innovation requires a high level of change. You really need to be carving up the jelly and looking at everything from a different perspective. In a sense, rewiring the business to better accommodate innovation. Otherwise, innovation can die very easily within a company. And these businesses often, they often employ us to come up with innovative new ideas. And, of course, everybody wants a Dyson-esque mega idea, but they're pretty rare, to be honest with you. Usually, innovation is about a series of small things brought together in a new and different way to create something genuinely new. The cordless kettle is a good example.
Tefal.
That company, Tefal, was already making a cordless iron in another part of France, right? That had the connector system that could be put in the base of a kettle.
And you dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
Yeah, I mean, it was all there, basically. So it wasn't an interesting. I think it's really fascinating. It's an interesting observation about how design has changed, over the years that I've been a designer. And we could talk about that because there's a lot of things to talk about. But one of them is that if we had done the user research, we didn't do this sort of Foresight type work in those days. If we'd had user groups and said to people, what's wrong with your kettle? Everyone was quite happy pulling the plug out.
Absolutely.
And
we don't know what we don't know.
And before that, of course, before electricity, all kettles were cordless. But if you ask people, they wouldn't have said it was a big problem. Whereas with ironing, they would say it was a big problem, right? Because it's always in the way, basically, the cord. So, I think that's something that has changed over the years. And now we have a much better grip on user research and really learning from users, and particularly ethnographic research, where we go into people's homes and we look at what they're doing. I mean, when we did a lot of irons for Tefal, and we got an innovation brief from them. And we went into people's homes, we watched them ironing, we hired a first floor shop in Oxford Street and pulled people off the street, paid them a £5 to come in and iron a shirt and film them doing it, And then we went to professional ironing experts and talked to them and watched them doing it. And really forensically looking at what people do, as opposed to listening to what they say, because they will often tell you something, but sometimes you see things by looking, which they don't or can't articulate. And we've had a lot of very interesting ideas that have come from really good ethnographic research. And the team is fantastic at doing that,
Fascinating. What I mean, your product achievements, they read like a who's who. What have been some of your favourite products that you've had a hand in?
Well, do you know what? I ran the Tefal account for 30 years, and so I think the greatest satisfaction I had there was going down the high street with my mum, past an appliance store, and saying, "Oh, we designed that, we designed that, we designed that."
That's an accomplishment.
And going into people's houses and seeing your toaster, your kettle, your loo, your basin, whatever it was, So that was a big thing for me. But one particular toaster that we did was called Avanti, which means let's go forwards in Italian. And it was we just took an ordinary toaster. This is going to maybe bore you a bit, but most toasters in those days, you put the slots were facing this way, sideways on, and you put the lever on the side, and we turned it round so it was front facing. So the lever was on the front where you need it, and we angled the slots so they were angled, so the toast, you could see your toast cooking.
Yeah,
and
good.
And you burn your fingers when you took it out.
Smart.
And the company said, "Oh, nobody's interested in that." The marketing director said, "It's a designer product. We might sell 20,000. We're not into that. There's no market for that. It's a designer niche product, right?" I fought tooth and nail to get that through that business.
You just had an instinct.
I just knew that this was bigger, because in a store, in those days, people used to buy in stores, right? You need something that stands out on shelf, that sells itself. People can't afford the advertising, the comms, and all of that. You go, and it's just got to sell itself. And eventually, I persuaded them. They said, "All right, we'll make it abroad, and we'll budget for 50,000 pieces. We'll do it as a niche project." by the end of year 3, they were selling 3.5 million pieces a year.
Congratulations.
So
Impressive.
that's design making a difference. It's not just about making something that's better. I mean, our mantra at Seymourpowell is always design is about making things better. Better for people, you, your mum, your granny, your sister, your aunt, whoever it is. Better for business, this isn't art. And better too for the world. We're trying to make things better for the world as well. And if it's not better, it's not really design.
And that leads on to the TV show Better by Design.
Oh, that's right. It does. Very, very good segue there.
How did you get into TV? That's fascinating.
Well, we always, we love what we do. We always thought that it would make good entertainment. And we struggled. We tried to interest the BBC in it. We tried to interest others in it. And eventually we ran into a production company called Uden Associates who had a strand on Channel 4 called Equinox, which is a kind of science strand.
How do you run into a production company? For anybody listening who thinks they would like to translate what they do onto TV, how do you run into a production company?
I can't remember how we met Patrick Uden of Uden Associates, but he was doing such brilliant work on Channel 4 on the Equinox strand. I don't know how we did that. Maybe we called him. I don't know. I can't remember. And we then made one program in the Equinox strand, which was called Designing Dream Machines, not our title. And it followed the genesis of 3 projects. It's like a fly-on-the-wall documentary.
Yeah.
And it did really well. Channel 4 was really pleased with it and then they said, well, can you do something else? And we said, we'd like to do a series. And they said, oh, no, well, nobody's interested in design. It's very South Bank, it's very highfalutin, very intellectual, interested for people, for people who watch programs about art and music and all that. They didn't see it as entertainment, right? They didn't see it like that. And so we put together an idea for one program, which was called Body Machines.
Is this to do with the Shanos, the bio-born
Yes. So that program started life as Body Machines. And we were going to generate on television ideas for body machines. So they could be shoes, they could be lots of things. But as it turned out, Channel 4 was particularly interested in the
bosoms.
bra. Yes, I wonder why. And it was very, very interesting because basically it's the lingerie industry.
And it became a best-selling bra.
It was, well, it's a bit of a story. It's a great story, but we quickly established that we didn't know anything about bras. We don't wear bras, right? That's the first thing.
But you don't have to. You have transferable skills, as you've explained.
Well, I think there's a lot of very interesting things about a woman's bra that, for a start, you put it on in a weird way. It's like this is a kind of position that torturers use, to do things.
Well, it's weird for you because you're a man.
Yes, of course, of course. And we're not pretending to be an expert in bras, but I didn't know, and they told us that the origins of the cup size system are lost in time. The sizing system, as you were talking
A,
about,
B, C, D, double D.
What most people don't know is that after D it goes E for enormous, F for effing enormous,
double F,
G gigantic.
I used to work for Playtex.
H huge, humongous, and then double H, right?
For how humongous?
No, just about the size. The wire for that is about like half a basketball hoop. But what we found is that. And you come back to your thing about problem solving. Wearing a bra is not a problem for 90% of women. But when you get into the bigger sizes, it can be very problematic. And so we focused on how to make a bra for the bigger bust. And it was fantastic. And doing that on television, when we did television, the consequences of failure were too terrible to even think about. You were putting yourself down saying, we're going to come up with a great idea.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
you need to win.
You are stuffed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very, very hard. It's hard enough when you're doing it commercially, but when you're doing it on television, gosh, that was hard, and it really took its toll on us. To be honest with you.
What do you think will be your legacy? How will people remember?
Well, what those programs did was they put design on the public map. People, ordinary people, the people we design products for, were talking about design. Kids were talking about design, in a way that they hadn't been before. There was sort of understanding, and I think we made design interesting and entertaining, because it is interesting and it is fascinating and it's fun. Let's not lose sight of the fact that actually what we do is a job to die for. It's a fantastic job, and all we're doing was taking that enthusiasm and passion onto television, and we were lucky to be able to do it.
How will people remember you?
God, I don't know. I don't know if they'll remember me at all. I'm just one of those people in design that had his day and they moved on, you know.
What a load of rubbish. I've met you for an hour and you are absolutely fascinating. I'll ask you about some of the big challenges that the creative industry are facing.
I think that's very interesting. The changes in the creative industry. I mean, obviously we all know the huge impact that's happened to advertising, for example, which has really been creatively badly affected, I think.
Can you discuss that?
Yeah, because nowadays creativity is not as highly valued by clients as it was. And you know, I'm certainly old enough, and you probably are old enough to remember absolutely brilliant ads. You know, you go to work the next day and say, "Did you see that wonderful Axe for Link?"
John Lewis ad,
or John Lewis, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen so much now, which means the creative industry in advertising has become heavily squeezed, and the output is not valued, and they don't see the value in it. That might change, but in design, it's changed fundamentally because the tools have changed through which we work. I've lived through a period which started with a drawing board and a pencil and is now in VR. You know, that's a fantastic journey of change, isn't it? And the processes by which things are made, the manufacturing processes, have also changed. You know, we have rapid prototyping that can create things so fast now. We can be more effective. And the nature of what we do has changed because we always talk about meta products. Meta products are seamless combinations of hardware, software, and service. Mm-hmm. First meta product was iPod. Hardware, software, service was iTunes. You know, the delivery of a service. And a lot of work we do now is in meta products, and they are mega complicated. Lots and lots of things, you know, that more things influencing the outcome of what you do than when you were just dealing with a product. And that level of complexity and the need to work with many different disciplines all together. I mean, we have a UI UX team that is, you know, just focusing on UI UX. We've got our rendering and VR team, and we've got our Foresight team, product and transportation team. We've also got a brand packaging team too. So, and all of those people work together. And I think when Seymourpowell is on song, it's when all of those people are pulling in the same direction towards the delivery of something fantastic.
There is a school of thought that within the creative industry, it's being affected negatively because of a skills shortage. And I'm just wondering if you were aware of that, or if...
Oh God, yes, very much aware of it. Yes.
What's the problem?
Because I think that the colleges, the universities, the courses that train the people that they intend us to employ are not doing an adequate job.
How so?
They're not equipping them with some of the fundamental skills that they need.
Which are,
I think, a better understanding of creativity. I think drawing and, you know, I mentioned this before, the ability to conceptualize things quickly. You know, it doesn't matter if it's on a 3D CAD screen or with your pencil. I find that's missing. They're not necessarily always very articulate. They're not big bandwidth thinkers. You know, I mean, even when you're young, you can aspire to be a big bandwidth thinker. And they all want to be famous immediately on YouTube or something, which we never had.
Interesting. Fascinating. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for your time. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. Just one thing. What time do you get up now? Are you still up at 5 o'clock?
6:10.
6:10. Are you an advocate for early mornings?
Very much.
Why?
I just seem to function better in the early mornings. You know, as a student, we used to work late into the night. Nowadays, you know, I've always been very rigorous at, you know, cutting off work at a certain point and then having my brain unwind at home with my family, with my wife, literally turn it off. And then when I get up, I'm ready to go again the next morning, you know, and I'm an early morning person. Whereas when I was doing it at night, you'd be exhausted the next day because you'd been up too late. Getting up late puts you out of sync with the rest of the people's days, your clients' days, everything else. Whereas early morning, it's just, I'm just an early morning person.
You have a very collaborative spirit. You are direct, and I appreciate that. Extremely credible, obviously, and authoritative. Thank you so much for your time. I've loved chatting with you.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed today's podcast, do like and subscribe. It means the world. And I'll be here every Monday with more fascinating guests. See you then. Thank you.